Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, love, and blessings of Allah be with you. Welcome to Ramadan Transformation. Today is day number 10. MashaAllah. You're almost halfway through, over a third of the way through Ramadan. So, congratulations. Today, we're looking at the next episode of Ramadan Transformation. I want this Ramadan to be the Ramadan that transforms your life. And today, we're going to look at the concept of fearlessness and courage. So up until now in this Ramadan transformation series, I've been explaining the core basis. The inside out paradigm is the basis of this whole paradigm of transformation. We've been talking about the power of thought, how thought is connected to feeling. From here on out, what we really want to do is just say, okay, given that feeling comes from thought in the moment, what does that imply about our lives? Why does that cause so much transformation? So inshallah, from here on out, I'm going to give you each day another way that this understanding completely transforms your life. So we're saying, since feeling comes from thought, therefore X, Y, Z. And the first implication of this is fearlessness. Fearlessness, also known as courage. So what is fearlessness? Well, fearlessness in reality is the most boring thing in the world. It sounds like a big bravado, yes, I am fearless. But in reality, fearlessness is it's how it is most of the time. Right now, you are totally fearless. Right now, you're totally fearless. Do you have any big fears about watching this video? Right now, you're fearless. Pretty cool. Well, here's the most important thing to know about fearlessness and why I believe that you can live your whole life being fearless. Now, most of your life, you're fearless anyway. Most of the time, you're fearless anyway. But maybe 95% of the time, you're fearless. And then 5% of the time, you start freaking yourself out over something. Oh my gosh, that thing is so scary. I can't do that. Oh my gosh, I could never speak in public. MashaAllah, I don't know how you speak in public. It's such a scary thing. Well, actually, I want to share with you an understanding that is a natural implication of everything we've talked about so far. So the first thing to get about fear is that all our fears are fears of what? All our fears are just fears of. All our fears are just fears of this. All our fears are just fears of feelings. You're like, what? I'm not afraid of feelings. What are you talking about, Mamoon? All of our fears are just fears of feelings. Let's say you're afraid to, you've got a big job interview coming up and you've got a lot of fear and anxiety and nervousness around it. Well, what are you really afraid of? Maybe you're afraid you don't get the job. And if you don't get the job, you will feel what? You'll feel depressed or upset or you won't have security. The feeling of security will have disappeared. If you got the job, you'd feel really secure. If you don't get the job, you'll feel insecure. So what you're really afraid of before the interview is the feeling that you think you'll get if you don't get the job. If you're afraid to tell somebody you love that you love them, what are you really afraid of? You're afraid of the feeling of not just being rejected, but you're afraid of the feeling you'll get after you're rejected. All of our fears are just fears of feelings. If you're afraid of, I don't know, almost all of the fears that hold us back in life, all of our insecurities. I had a client who was really afraid of going to networking events. And when she realized, all I'm afraid of is these feelings that might come up if I go to a networking event and everybody thinks I'm a freak and trying to sell them something. So again, it was the feeling of rejection. All of our fears are just fears of feelings. Now, why is this so important? Well, because we already know that all feelings just come from, where do all feelings come from? Based on the previous Ramadan transformation session. All of our feelings come from thought. So if all of our fears are fears of feelings, and all of our feelings come from thought, then we're being afraid of our own thought. How can you be afraid of your own thought? Right? That's crazy. How can you be afraid of you can't be afraid of something you know you created. All of our fears are just fears of feelings, and all feeling comes from thought. So when we're afraid, we're really just afraid of our own thought. That's insane. How can you be afraid of your own thought? It's crazy, but that's what we do. Now, the moment you see that, you kind of realize there's nothing to be afraid of anymore, right? And you return to your natural state of fearlessness. You know, oftentimes people say, well, if X happens, then I'll feel Y. So if I have a client comes to me and they say, you know, I'm really afraid, or, you know, I'm feeling kind of insecure because if the project doesn't turn out the way I want it to, you know, then, you know, everybody on my team will be disappointed and then I'll feel terrible. You know, if the big product launch I'm doing doesn't make $1 million, right, then I'll have let everyone down, and then I'll have let all of my partners down, and then, you know, I'll feel really bad. So we always think that we convince ourselves that if X, Y, Z happens, then I'll feel A, B, C. Now, you know what's really interesting about that? Is if there is one thing that us human beings are terrible at, we are terrible at, it is predicting how we'll feel in different situations. We're terrible at predicting how we'll feel in different situations. Let me ask you a question, and it's a question I've asked pretty much all of my coaching clients, probably hundreds of people until now. And if you've been watching some of my videos, you've probably heard me say it before. But let me ask you a question right now. I want you to ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be. Do you know what your next thought will be? I don't. And you probably don't either. Well, if feeling comes from thought, or since feeling comes from thought, and you don't know what your next thought will be, how could you possibly know what you're going to be feeling next? You don't know what you're going to be feeling in the next minute. You don't know what you're going to be feeling tomorrow. You don't know what you're going to be thinking at 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. So how could you possibly, if you don't know what you're going to be thinking and feeling next, how could you possibly know what you're going to be thinking and feeling in a situation that's very drastic and different to all of your everyday situations, like a job interview or, you know, your project working out or not working out? The truth is you have no idea how you're going to be feeling. And therefore, there's nothing, like, only by pretending we know how we're going to feel if X, Y, Z happens, which we don't, can we convince ourselves that I have to be really afraid now because if X, Y, Z happens, I'm going to feel really bad. Feeling comes from thought. It doesn't come from the situation anyway. And you have no idea how you're going to be feeling next. So you have no idea what you're going to be thinking and feeling if the big thing that you're afraid of happens. So that is why you are totally fearless and have the ability to continue being totally courageous and fearless, regardless of circumstances. You know, the reason I say courage is the highest form of courage is speaking the truth to a tyrant. Gently, you know, Moses was asked in the Quran to go to the Pharaoh and gently speak some words of truth. How can you go to the biggest dictator and tyrant and gently speak words of truth? Well, you need to be a little bit fearless. And how can you be fearless? By knowing that ultimately your feelings don't come from whatever that tyrant does. Your feelings come from inside of you. Allah gives you your feelings via the power of thought. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم